All right, we'll go ahead and start with this week's reading quiz.
Good morning.
about 1 minute left. All right. Couple things as we get started. First of all, the exams are graded. There are a couple of makeups I'm waiting on, so once those are complete, I'll give those back to you, but those grades are posted on Canvas. Overall, I thought the class as a whole did well. Some of you really improved from the first exam to the second exam, so that was good to see. Also on Canvas, there's a column that says current grade that gives you your standing in the class and is also your midterm grade. Midterm grades are due to be posted today. They'll be available by tomorrow, so you'll be able to see how you're doing in all your classes. But you can go on Canvas and look at the grade book now and see how you're doing in this class. Overall, again, I think most people are doing well in the class. If there's anything that you would like to talk about as far as improving your particular grade, I'd be glad to meet with you, talk to you about the opportunities you have for improving and succeeding in the class. Right now, I would say, for nearly everybody, maybe not everybody, but nearly everybody, you're still in pretty good shape, even if you did not do as well on that second exam as you would like. Make sure you're here on time to take the reading quizzes, make sure that you're getting those attendance points, and taking the notes. Remember, anything that is in your Bible, that's written in your Bible, you can use on that exam. So, make sure to be taking notes in your Bible so that you have that information there on the exam. But in general, most people are doing well in the exams. I would also say to not forget that there is an assignment due at the end of the semester that you should keep in mind. All right, so there's still plenty of time to complete it, but it might be something you want to start thinking about. And that is basically a reflection essay or video. Right? It depends on you, which you would rather do, a video or write an essay. Both of those are asking you to take some aspect of the grand narrative, the grand story we've been talking about on the Bible, right? Is there something that has spoken to you, right? Something that has really been important to you. Now, that may be something we still haven't covered yet, but as you're thinking about it, what's been something that's really stuck out to you? The assignment will be to describe that, right? If it's a story we talked about, right, just tell the story, and then how that can apply to your life. Right? So it's not a research paper. It's not anything that you'll have to do any outside reading on. But that is a pretty sizable part of your grade. So that's coming up. Right? And then of course we have 2 more exams. So there's plenty of opportunity for additional points in the semester. As I mentioned, nearly everybody's in really good shape. So for some of you, it's just keep doing what you're doing. For some of you, it might be, hey, if you just step it up just a little bit, you'll put yourself in some really good position. But if you have any questions about your grade, by all means, let me know. The last thing I want to talk about before we get into the material for today is that next week, you've probably already heard, is the Faulkner Bible Lectureships. From Sunday through Wednesday, there will be various lectures, people speaking on various topics related to the Bible and the theme of the church. Because of that, all of these classrooms in the Bible building will be in use next week. So we will not have class Tuesday or Thursday of next week. Even though there aren't lectures on Thursday, you'll have the entire week off. You are required to attend 2 lectures. They can be 2 lectures of your choosing. It may be the best ones to go to are at 9 o'clock next Tuesday. Right? So you have to go to 2 lectures next week and submit your notes to a Zorn scholar. That's one of our Bible majors. They'll be around. They'll have a blue name tag on, so you'll just give your notes to them after you've sat through a session. Monday, there are several sessions devoted to being a Christian and an athlete. They'll be in the Rotunda Auditorium. Those would be, I know many of you in here are athletes, those would be 2 good ones to do. You could do 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, be done, and not have anything for the rest of the week. But you have to complete 2, you have to go to 2 of those lectures during the week next week. Right? So no class, but you do need to go to 2 of those lectures. Go ahead, Ron.
Are they going to give the notes to you? Or?
Yes, they'll eventually give the notes to me, right? So there'll be Zorn scholars either in the sessions you're in or outside in the hallways. You'll just give those to them, and they'll eventually give them to me once they've gotten them collected. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Where will the list of all of them be?
So there are some. So you can go on the website. faulkner.edu/lectureship. But there are also some printed ones out in the atrium area. And so they're on tables, there's a bookcase, so you can grab one of them or you can go to the website. I think there are also some QR codes around you can scan and get it on your phone if you'd rather have the electronic. Other questions? Like I said, you could go to the first 2 lectures on Monday and be done. Or you can look at the lectureship things and see which ones are the most interesting to you. But hopefully you'll find something that will encourage you spiritually, maybe get you thinking in your spiritual life. All right, the last thing we focused on when we were meeting prior to the exam was talking about the family of a man named Abraham. And Abraham, we noted, is an important part of God's rescue plan. So what I want to do is share with you a Bible Project video. We watched one that covered the first half of Genesis, or the first part of Genesis. This one covers the second part of Genesis and highlights some of the things and we'll watch that, and then we'll focus on Joseph, which is where we ended, and then move on from there. Once we have some sound.
God has created all things, and he makes humans in his image to rule the world on his behalf. The humans choose sin and rebellion, and so the world spins out of control into violence and death, all leading up to the rebellion and scattering of the people in Babylon. And so the big question is, what is God going to do to rescue and redeem his world? Well, out of that scattering at Babylon, the author traces a genealogy of just one family, that leads eventually to a man named Abram, later known as Abraham. And God's promise to Abraham at the beginning of chapter 12 opens up a whole new movement in the story. God calls Abraham to leave his home and go to the land of Canaan, which God says will become his one day. And in that land, God promises to make Abraham into a great nation, to make his name great, and to bless him. Now, these promises are connected back to earlier parts of the book. So Babylon had arrogantly tried to make a great name for itself, and that didn't go over very well. But God, in his generosity, is going to bestow a great name on this no-name guy, Abraham. And God's blessing of Abraham echoes all the way back to that original blessing God gave humanity in the beginning. So the question is, why is God going to bless Abraham and his family? And the last line of God's promise makes this clear. So that all the families of the earth will find God's blessing in you. Now this is key for understanding the whole rest of the biblical story. God's plan is to rescue and bless his rebellious world through Abraham's family. And this is why the whole rest of the Old Testament story is just going to focus on this one family, eventually called the people of Israel. This is also why Israel will later be called a kingdom of priests at Mount Sinai. God wants to use them to show all of the other nations what he's like. And ultimately, this is the promise that gets picked up by the later biblical prophets and poets who say that its fulfillment will come through Israel's messianic king, whose reign will bring justice and peace to all of the nations. Now, at this point of the story, none of that's clear. You just have to keep reading and watch the promise develop. And so the rest of the book focuses on Abraham and his family. First, Abraham himself, then his son Isaac, and then his son Jacob, and then Jacob's 12 sons. And the stories about each generation, they're united by two main themes. So first, each generation of Abraham's family is marked by repeated failure. They just keep making really bad decisions that mess up their lives and put God's promise in jeopardy. However, God remains faithful to them. He keeps rescuing them from themselves and reaffirming his commitment to bless them and bless the nations through them despite their failings. So the Abraham stories. God had promised Abraham a huge family, but on two different occasions, he's afraid for his life because other men are attracted to his wife, and so he denies that he's even married to her, which creates, of course, all of these problems. And not only that, Abraham and his wife Sarah, they can't have children, and so Sarah arranges for Abraham to sleep with one of their servant girls, which also creates all of these problems in the family. But each time, God bails Abraham out. And in chapters 15 and 17, God even formalizes his promise to Abraham with an official commitment called a covenant. This is a classic scene. God invites Abraham to look up at the night stars and to count them. And he says, that's how numerous your family is going to be. And despite all of the odds, having no kids and no way to have any at the moment, Abraham looks up in the sky and simply trusts God's promise. And God responds by entering into a covenant with Abraham, promising that he will become a father of many nations, that God's blessing may come to the whole world. God asked Abraham to mark his family with a sign of the covenant, circumcision of all the male boys in the family. This is a symbol to remind them that the fruitfulness of their family is a gift from God. And so Abraham has lots of kids eventually, and he dies at a good old age. Now the Jacob stories play out these themes even more dramatically. From birth, Jacob lives up to the meaning of his name, which is deceiver. He cheats his brother Esau out of his inheritance and blessing, and he does it by deceiving his old blind father, no less, and then he just takes off. He goes on to take 4 wives, even though he really only loves one, Rachel, and this creates all of these rivalries in the family. The only thing that humbles Jacob is being deceived by his uncle Laban, who cheats him out of years of his life. The tables have finally turned. And so it's a humbled Jacob that returns to his homeland. And in a very strange story, Jacob ends up wrestling with God as he demands that God bless him. Some things never really change, do they? However, God honors his determination, and he passes Abraham's blessing on to him. And he renames Jacob as Israel, which means wrestles with God. Now, it's this last part of the book, the story of Jacob's sons, where all the themes come to a head. Jacob loves his second to youngest son, Joseph, more than any of the others, and he gives him this special jacket. And the 10 older sons come to hate Joseph, and so they kidnap him, and they plan to kill him, but instead they decide to just sell him into slavery in Egypt, where he ends up in prison. Talk about family failure. But God is with Joseph, and he orchestrates Joseph's release from prison, and Pharaoh ends up elevating Joseph to second in command over all of Egypt. And so Joseph saves the nation of Egypt during a famine. And he also ends up saving his brothers and his family from starving to death. And so once again, we can see the folly and the sin of Abraham's family is met with God's faithfulness, who subverts even the evil of the brothers into an occasion to save life. And this is actually what Joseph says right near the end of the book. He says to his brothers, "You all planned this for evil, but God planned it for good, to save many lives." Now, these words are strategically placed at the end of the book because they summarize not only the story of Joseph and his brothers, but the book as a whole. From Genesis 3 onward, humans keep acting selfishly and doing evil, but this God is not going to leave his world to its own devices. He remains faithful and determined to bless people despite their failures. You can see this especially in how that mysterious promise about the descendant of the woman gets developed throughout the book. So remember, Genesis 3, God promised that this wounded victor would come and crush the snake and defeat evil at its source. And the author then connects this promise directly to the line of Abraham. This is a part of how God's going to bring his blessing to the nations. Now from Abraham, this promise gets connected to Judah, the fourth son of Jacob. And this is how. In an extremely important poem in chapter 49, in aging Jacob, he's on his deathbed, he wants to bless his 12 sons. And when he comes to Judah, Jacob predicts that Judah will become the tribe of Israel's royal leaders, and that one day a king will come who will command the obedience of all the nations and fulfill God's promise to restore the garden blessing to all of the world. And then after this, Jacob dies. And later Joseph dies too. And the growing family remains in Egypt. And so the book of Genesis ends with all of these future hopes and promises left hanging and undeveloped. And it forces you to turn the page to see how it's all going to turn out. But for now, that's the book of Genesis.
All right, so I think that gives us a good overview of what we've been looking at over the past several classes, as well as some things we haven't necessarily been able to get to yet at this point. We had started talking about, and it's reflected there in the video, that despite humanity's sin in Genesis chapter 3, God has been working to bring about rescue, right? God has his own plan to overturn a lot of what had happened in the Garden of Eden. And so keeping that passage, Genesis 3:15, in mind is an important part of understanding this overarching narrative of Scripture. Right? That there will come this offspring that will defeat the serpent. That the sin, the death, the corruption that had been brought into humanity through humans rebelling against God, not trusting God, to not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Right? That God is undoing the consequences of all of this. And again, through the family of Abraham. Right? And then we talked about Abraham's son Isaac. God makes Abraham wait for a long time before Isaac is born. Isaac, of course, has two sons. Esau, the oldest, Jacob, the youngest. We talked about, right, Jacob, his deception, his scheming. We didn't talk about something that was mentioned in the video, that God gives Jacob another name, that of Israel. You remember from the video what Israel means? Wrestles with God, right? And so, Jacob has this moment, Genesis chapter 32, where he struggles, he wrestles with God. Other passages say he's kind of an angel of God, but this angel is kind of a representative of God. Right? And Jacob manages, he doesn't win, but he manages to hold on. Right? And so he's given this new name, Israel. And that's where this family will eventually be known as the Israelites, and why there is a nation in the Middle East known as the nation of Israel, right? It ties all back to Jacob and Jacob's new name. And we talked, and as was mentioned in the video, that Jacob, Israel, has 12 sons. And despite him having 12 sons and one daughter, he has a son who is particularly special. Which of his sons is the one that's the special one? Joseph. And so Joseph, we talked about, right, is because of the favor that his father puts on him, right, causes a lot of problems between him and his brothers, so much so that they eventually sell him into slavery, so that he goes down to Egypt. So that's where we're going to pick up. So let's go to Genesis. Let's go to Genesis chapter 37. This is before he's sold into slavery. This is page 36. Might be slightly further along, depending on the particular printing that you have. So, Genesis 37, beginning in verse 2. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his sons because he was the son of his old age, made him a robe with many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brother said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Right, so they're jealous of Joseph. They hate Joseph because he's special, but they also has these dreams. Now, one is of, like you're gathering wheat, right? Agrarian society, you're gathering wheat, you bundle it into these sheaves, and Joseph says, all your bundles were bowing down to my bundle. And then he tells another dream he has, right? That the sun, moon, and 11 stars had bowed down to him. What does his family take these dreams to mean? All right, he thinks he's better than them, but specifically they're going to do what? Yeah, but basically, worship him, or there's going to be some sense where Joseph has these dreams that he's going to rule over them. Right? He's going to be a ruler over them. could probably see why his brothers didn't particularly like him. Right? Not only do you have this fancy coat, which you can't really wear to work in the fields, right? So you're not working as much as we are. And then you're having these dreams about how great you are. So they decide to sell him into slavery. So he gets to Egypt, and he is first sold to a man named Potiphar. Now, Potiphar is a soldier in Pharaoh's army. This is Genesis chapter 39. And so, chapter 39, verse 4, it says, So Joseph found favor in his sight, that's Potiphar's sight, and attended him, and made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. And so basically, Joseph is entrusted to be Potiphar's overseer. Right? He's going to take care of everything in the household. Right? So he's been sold into slavery. Over time, he rises to be in charge of Potiphar's household. That doesn't last, though, because evidently Joseph is a pretty attractive young man. And Potiphar's wife is interested in having sex with him. And so day after day, she's trying to pressure him into having sex. And Joseph refuses. Right? He doesn't want to dishonor God this way. He doesn't want to dishonor Potiphar this way. But the wife keeps pressing and pressing. One day, when they're alone at the house, she really tries to get him to sleep with her. And she grabs him by the coat. This is a different coat, not the coat he had. And he gets out of the coat and runs away. And so she accuses him. She gets upset. Right? Her advance has been spurned so many times. And so she tells her husband, right? Joseph, basically saying Joseph tried to assault her. Right? And so, as you might expect, right, Potiphar's very upset and all this, so he sends Joseph to jail. So he's sold into slavery, rises in Potiphar's household, he's thrown in jail. But notice, again, chapter 39, verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. So once again, Joseph rises, right, to the point where he's an overseer again. So despite all the things that has been happening to him, God is continuing to bring favor, bring blessings to Joseph. Now there are two prisoners that come into Joseph's care at some point. And one is known as the cupbearer, and then the other is a baker. Both of them involved in Pharaoh's house. Pharaoh is the name for the king of Egypt. The cupbearer would have been a rather trusted position. Basically, the idea of a cupbearer is kind of like the king's food taster. Right? You're responsible to make sure nobody poisons the king. And so you're tasting his food, you're tasting the wine, you're kind of presenting, serving Pharaoh. So it's a pretty important position. But for some reason, the cupbearer, the baker, both fall out of favor. Pharaoh sends them to prison. They have dreams. The cupbearer's dream is, it's described there in chapter 40, beginning in verse 9. And so the cupbearer sees himself squeezing grapes into Pharaoh's cup. And Joseph interprets the dream for him, tells him what it means. Right? In 3 days, Pharaoh is going to lift up your head, and he's going to restore you back to your position. And Joseph says to him, right, when you get back there, please tell Pharaoh about my condition. Right? I've been thrown in here. I'm unjustly imprisoned. Try to do something for me. The baker hears this interpretation. Well, that's great. Let me tell you my dream. I had these 3 baskets of bread on my head. And the birds came and were eating the bread out of the baskets. Joseph interprets that dream. He says, in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to lift up your head off of your body. Right? And so the baker is going to be executed. But it's interesting, in both cases, if Pharaoh is going to lift up your head. And so, on Pharaoh's birthday, he restores the cupbearer, he executes the baker, and the cupbearer promptly forgets about Joseph. Until, chapter 41, Pharaoh has some dreams. Beginning in chapter 1 of verse 1 of chapter 41. Chapter 41, verse 1. After 2 whole years, right? So Joseph is in prison 2 years more. Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, right, the big river there in Africa, and behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump. And they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile after them, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, thin cows ate up the 7 attractive, plump cows. And Pharaoh awoke. Verse 5. He fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk. And behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump, full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So what are the 2 dreams Pharaoh has?
The 7 cows.
All right, what happens with the cows? All right, so the ugly cows eat the good cows. What's the second dream?
7 stalks of corn grew, and then 7 ugly stalks of corn grew and destroyed the
Right, which does make you wonder, what did Pharaoh eat before he went to bed? Because these are some strange dreams, right? Ugly grain eating good grain. Whatever it was about these dreams, they've so impressed Pharaoh that he thinks they must have some meaning, because it must be something important, because they're kind of the similar types of things are happening. So what's going on here? And so he has some advisors, and he's trying to get his advisors to tell him, what does this dream mean? And it's then that the cupbearer remembers, yeah, there's this guy in prison, and he knows things. He can interpret dreams. And so Pharaoh gets Joseph out of prison to interpret the dreams. And Joseph says, both dreams are saying the same thing. And because there were multiple dreams, this is something God is going to do. This is going to happen. There's going to be 7 plentiful years. right? There's going to be good grain harvest, right? There's going to be abundance of food. But followed after that are 7 years of famine. And it's going to be terrible. It's going to be so bad it'll make you forget those 7 good years. So what you need to do, Pharaoh, is during these 7 plentiful years, you need to stock up, right? Load up as much as you can in storage. So when the 7 years of famine hit, everybody in Egypt has food. Pharaoh is so impressed that he makes Joseph second in command. Who else am I going to put over this, right? And so now Joseph, who had been sold into slavery, thrown into jail, is now second in command to the king of Egypt. For 7 years, they gather all sorts of food into storehouses. And then the famine hits. Now in Egypt, there's plenty of food, right? They start giving out the food to the people, but they have so much food that people are coming from surrounding areas in order to get the food, right? And so Joseph is selling food to these other people because they have so much. And then one day, in walks 10 guys who bear a striking resemblance to each other. And Joseph knows who they are. There's brothers. One of them's been left at home, but the other 10 have come to Egypt for peace. Now, it's been decades since he's seen them. But he recognizes them. But they don't recognize him. Why might they not recognize him? They probably thought he was dead, right? I mean, you hate him so much, you sell him into slavery, you do not expect him to end up second in command in Egypt. Plus, he's probably wearing Egyptian clothes, Egyptian makeup, all the other things that would have stylized an Egyptian, right? So they're coming in, they have no idea this is Joseph. Now, here come his 10 brothers looking for food. Joseph has been blessed by God through all of this. He's maintained his trust and his faith in God in all of this. So he's living a right kind of life. So what should his response be when he sees his brothers come? What's the right thing to do? Give them the food. I'm so glad to see y'all. Guess what he doesn't do? He doesn't do that. All right? He accuses them of being spies. You've come to spy out the land. You know these famines going on. You know we're weak. You've come to try and figure out some way to attack us. And he throws them in prison. So, we might say, well, the right thing to do is, you should forgive. But Joseph's human. So he says to them, after letting him sit some time in jail, all right, here's what I'll do. I'll give you some food. One of you has to stay here in prison, and the rest of you go. But if you ever want to come back here for more food, you need to bring your other brother, right? Because he questioned them, and they mentioned that, right, there's one brother that's left back with our father. The brother left back with the father is Joseph's full brother, right? These other guys are his half-brothers. They have different mothers than he does. The one left back at home is his full brother. So you can't come back here and get food unless you bring that other brother with you. He throws one of his brothers in prison. This brother has a wife and kids back home. And he's willing to let him sit in prison, to trust his other brothers are going to come back. What he also does is put their money, has their money put back into the bags of food that they're taking back with them. So they get home and they're terrified. Right? What is God doing to us? Right? Looks now like we've stolen this, and after some time, the food runs out. They need to go back. Now Jacob, he thinks one of his sons is dead, and now they say, well, we got to take the younger one. We got to take Benjamin with us, because the man said, we're not getting any food unless we bring him back. You take him from me, I'm going to die. We could have been there and back again. So he agrees, right? So Benjamin and the other brothers come back. They meet Joseph again. They try to give the money back, and Joseph's manager says, no, everything's fine with the money. Joseph has them come in for a meal, sits them in order by age. They're kind of sitting around looking like, wait a second, how'd this guy know that I'm the oldest, you're the next oldest? As they're leaving to go again, Joseph has their money put back in and one of his cups. It's a very special cup. Has him put in Benjamin's bag. After they go some distance, Joseph sends some of his soldiers after them. They catch up to him and said, why have you stolen? You've stolen my master's cup. Well, whoever's bag it's in, right, that person will become a slave. They begin to open everything up, and there's a cup in Benjamin's sack. What's Jacob said? If you lose him, it's going to kill me. So they're terrified. They go back to Joseph. They're pleading, right? Take one of us slave instead of Benjamin. No, I'll just take them. Eventually, Joseph breaks down. Emotionally, he can't take it anymore. He reveals himself to his brothers. He brings his entire family to Egypt, sets them up on some of the best land, and then Jacob dies. So let's turn to chapter 50. When Jacob dies, Joseph's brothers are very concerned because they think, right, now he's really going to get us. Genesis 50, beginning in verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us, pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Right? They're terrified, understandably so. Right? Joseph's going to kill them. But he tells them that despite everything that he went through, some of which they did to him, some of which was done to him in Egypt, God meant it for good. the evil that had been done to Joseph, God had turned into good. Now, when Joseph says God meant it for good, what could he be referring to?
All the hurt and the pain that he suffered.
Yeah, and so he suffered all this hurt and suffering. What was the good that came out of that?
Restoring the relationship with others.
Okay, it ends up restoring their relationship, but how else is all of this working out for good? Right? So by providing all of this food, not just for Egypt, but for some of these surrounding peoples, right? That God had taken, right, this slave, imprisoned person, right, prisoner, and turned it into good, right? Turned it into good for the land of Egypt, for the surrounding lands. But, right, so the good can be this, right? It can be the relationship with his brothers. But it can also stretch the whole way back here. God had chosen that this offspring was going to be through Abraham's line. Was going to be a descendant of Abraham. And so all the evil that Joseph had gone through, right? Yes, it did. He was able to restore his relationship with his brothers. It provided for people at the time, but it was also preserving God's promise through all of this. Right? That it was helping make sure that Abraham's line would continue. And so it's a continuation of God's rescue plan that even when evil seems to be successful, God continues to work for good. We'll pause there. We'll pick up here in just a few minutes. So just take a few minutes stretch, and we'll get back into it here in just a couple minutes. Did you submit it? Okay, yeah. It should. Yeah. All right. You have a good day. All right, let's get back into it. We now turn to the book of Exodus. So Genesis ends with Abraham's family, right, the Israelites, in Egypt. Right, they moved down there to be with Joseph. Joseph's going to take care of them. Somebody read for us Exodus chapter 1 and verse 8.
Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph.
Right, so there's a new Pharaoh, right, which is the name for the king of Egypt. And he doesn't know Joseph. He doesn't remember all the things that Joseph did to help Egypt. Now this has been 400 years. There's roughly about 400 years between the end of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus. So over that time, it's been lost who Joseph is, what he's done, all this kind of thing. So all this Pharaoh sees is that there is this large group of Israelites. They have been fruitful and multiplied. And he's worried that if an outside force comes in, right, an invading army comes in, these Israelites are going to turn and they're going to help the invading army. So he decides, right, we're going to enslave the Israelites. We're going to make them slaves. So the Israelites are made slaves. But, despite the slavery, they continue to be fruitful and multiply. And verse 15, Pharaoh tells the Hebrew midwives, Hebrew is another name for Israelites, what I want you to do is, if there is a boy born to one of these Israelite Hebrew women, I want you to kill it. Right? And so Pharaoh intends to wipe out the Hebrews, the Israelites, by having their male children killed. But the midwives don't follow that. They don't agree with that, right? And so they continue they kind of lie. They kind of tell Pharaoh a lie of like, well, by the time we get there, they've already had the kid. And so there's nothing we can do. And so Pharaoh, verse 22, commands all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews, you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. So he starts with trying to get these people these women that are helping the Israelites give birth, right? That's what a midwife does, help a woman give birth. Tries to go that route, it's not working. He decides, get everybody involved. And that's when we turn to chapter 2. If somebody would read verses 1 through 5 of Exodus 2, and then somebody else 6 through 10.
Now a man from the house of Levi went and took his wife as a Levite's woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and she saw that he was a fine child. She hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and dotted it with pitch. She put the child in and placed it among the reeds by the river bank, and his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young woman walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it.
Verse 6 through 10.
When she opened it, she saw the child, and the older baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." And his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call her Judge?" But the Hebrew woman said, "That's your child." And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child and brother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Put this child in the nursery, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew older. She brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because he said, "I shall not be Lord."
All right, so we're introduced to this family. All right, and it said they're from the Levites. Levi was one of those sons of Abraham. Remember, Abraham had 12 sons. One of those was named Levi, right? So it's from Abraham's family. And they have a child, a son. They actually have an older son and a daughter, obviously. We're introduced to the daughter here as well. And so for 3 months, they try to hide him because they know what Pharaoh's command is, right? Kill all the male babies. Right? So they try to hide him, keep him hidden. But it gets to the point where they can't hide him any longer. And so what do they do with him? Right? Put him in a basket, stick him in the river. It works out, but I don't know if that's a good plan. Right? That doesn't sound to me like a good plan, but it worked out. Who finds this child? Pharaoh's daughter. Right? The same Pharaoh who has ordered all the male children of the Hebrews to be killed finds this boy. Now she too knows her father's rule. But seeing the baby, right, it's crying, right, she has compassion, right, she doesn't want it killed, doesn't want him killed. The sister manages to get the mother to nurse, right, this boy for some time. And then he is given back to Pharaoh's daughter to be raised as her son. Right? So he's adopted into the royal family of Egypt. And what's the name that Pharaoh's daughter gives to him? Moses. So he's a Hebrew, right? Member of Abraham's family, but he is raised as a member of Pharaoh's household. Right? Basically Pharaoh's grandson in a sense. So he would have lived a wealthy life, He would have been well educated, would have been well respected as a member of Pharaoh's household, despite him being an Israelite, despite him being a Hebrew. But evidently, Moses has some knowledge of his own identity, right? He knows who his family really is, even though he's been adopted in Pharaoh's household. So let's keep reading in Exodus chapter 2, if somebody would read verses 11 to 15.
One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hit him in the center. When he went out to the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, "Why do you strike your companion?" He answered, "Who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed an Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely the thing is known." You said through 15.
Yes.
When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian. He sat down by a well.
Right? So one day Moses goes out, and what does he see happen? 2 people fighting. Who's fighting? An Egyptian and an Israelite. And what does Moses do? Right? He kills the Egyptian. But know what he does first, right? It says he looks this way, he looks that way, right? And this isn't like a crime of passion where just suddenly Moses is like, all right, just kills the guy. He's looking this way, looking that way, making sure nobody's around to see. And so, right, it's not just killing, it's murder. Right? So he murders an Egyptian, buries his body. The next day, what happens? He finds out somebody knows, right? So he sees 2 Hebrews kind of fighting each other, and he's going, why are you fighting? Right? Well, the one guy says, "Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Ooh. Right? So he thought he had gotten away with it, thought it was secret, but it's out there. Right? And so Pharaoh wants to have Moses killed, right? He's a murderer. So he flees. He flees Egypt. He will get married, live with a man named Jethro and his daughters, marries one of his daughters, ends up taking care of Jethro's flocks. So let's continue on into chapter 3. If somebody would read verses 1 through 6 of Exodus 3, and then somebody else 7 through 12. Exodus 3, 1 through 6, 7 through 12.
Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to
Horeb.
the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, "I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned." When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush. "Moses, Moses," he said, "here I am." Then he said, "Do not come near, take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." He said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God.
All right, and then 7 through 12.
said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to do a good and broad. I cannot read today. Deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to do a good and broad land, and a land flowing with milk and honey, into the
All right.
place.
You can skip over those names, right? There are a bunch of different people groups, right? And then pick up in
Okay.
verse 9.
And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression in which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people and the children of Israel out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve the God on the mountain.
All right, so here's Moses for decades, right? He's living in exile, he's fled, he's serving as a shepherd. Once been in Pharaoh's household, now serving as a shepherd. And one day he is out with tending the flocks, right? His father-in-law, what does he see? He sees a burning bush. Now, what's unusual about this burning bush? It's not burning up, right? So it's on fire, but it's not burning up, right? So seeing a bush on fire might not be that unusual. I mean, not something that you see every day, but sometimes bushes are on fire, struck by lightning, right, whatever. Right? But this one is not burning up. So that fascinates Moses. He's a shepherd that lives out in the wilderness. I guess he doesn't see a lot of interesting things, right? And so he's fascinated by this bush that's not burning up. And when he goes over to the bush, what happens? Right? God speaks to him out of this bush. What's the message God has for Moses? Right? So first he says, right, to take his shoes off. Why?
Because he's older. He's older.
If you remember back to the video we watched, the Bible Project video we watched on holiness, right? That idea of God's power, his uniqueness, right? You have to come into that space. Right? You have to be reverential, right? You got to be careful coming in, right? And so he's taking his shoes off so that he can approach. And what's the rest of the message? He wants to send Moses back to Egypt. And he's going to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Now, in some sense, that's probably, Moses may have thought that's what he was doing when he killed that Egyptian, right? I'm standing up for my people. I'm the leader of my people. But they weren't accepting him then. Right? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian? But now God says, I want you to go back. I want you to go back, and I want you to lead the people out of Egypt. Basically, right, God has seen their oppression. He's seen what has been happening to his people. And he's decided that he is going to act. And Moses, remember, Moses, right, had acted, right, had murdered a guy. Right? He had acted decisively. now Moses has a bunch of excuses. Right? It's been a while. His anger has been tempered. He's been calmed down. He's an older man. Now he has all of these excuses. They won't listen to me. So God gives him some miracles to perform. Right? Take your staff, throw it on the ground. So he throws the staff on the ground, turns into a snake. Right? Picks it back up, turns back into a staff. Stick your hand in your coat. Right? Sticks his hand in your coat, pulls it out. It's got a skin disease called leprosy on it, which is a very dangerous and it's a very disgusting disease. Right? Stick your hand back in your coat. Back in the coat, pulls it out, it's clean again. Right? So if they don't listen to you, right, do these miracles, do these signs, and they'll. Well, I don't really speak that way. All right. He's been trained in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Right? You can probably speak well enough, Moses, but all right. I will have your brother, your older brother Aaron, who will do the speaking for you. And then Moses says, send somebody else. Right? Out of all the things that Moses has said, right, all the excuses, this is the one that gets God angry. Because he has chosen Moses. He's picked Moses. Moses, I want you to do this. And when Moses says, find somebody else to do it, God gets angry at him. I chose you. I picked you. I want you to do this. In the midst of all this, God also tells Moses his name, what God's name is. And we'll pick up with that on Thursday. Hope you have a good rest of your day.